Hello, welcome back to the Pink Floyd Completion Project, and today we are looking at Roger Waters's, depending on how you look at it, third or fourth studio album, Amused to Death. This is his third solo album after leaving the Floyd solo studio album, excuse me. And it's aged well in some ways. It's aged, not great in other ways. Musically, it has moments that are a little bit 90s, but not in the way of like grunge. I mean, like, 90s pop. It's sort of like Genesis's We Can't Dance. I'm going to tell you right now, this album is great. It's genuinely good. I don't know if I've come to that conclusion because his last two studio albums were particularly shit, so this looks fantastic by comparison. Or just because, after however many days of listening to an album every single day since January of this year, 2024, if you happen to be watching this years in the future, it's great. It's genuinely great. I don't know if I've grown a better appreciation for it, because I've listened to it before. I've listened to it at least once before. But it's genuinely really good. It's got Jeff Beck on guitar, Michael Kamen's back on orchestrations, and then for the rest of it, it's just like a million studio musicians. When I went to write down the personnel thing that I normally did, it was just like this wall of people, and I was just like, I'm not writing all that shit down. So, right, because everybody plays different instruments on different songs. The only consistent person is Roger. So it's very much, not Roger Waters and the group that he was touring with. It's Roger Waters. It's essentially Roger Waters and Jeff Beck. So, number one, Ballad of Bill Hubbard. It's a Shine On You Crazy Diamond-esque opening song. I think, it's, got that semi-ambient feel, and it's also, mixed with recordings of newscasts talking about, I believe, the Gulf War. I believe that's what would have been happening in the early 90s. Again, I wrote finally something good in this discography. Jeff Beck is a great choice to give this album more of a Floyd-esque feel. It's gloriously free of 80s shit. It is gloriously free of 80s shit. I cannot tell you how happy I am to not have to listen to 80s noises after this point in the project. It makes me very happy. Song number 2, What God Wants, Part 1. It's like a fucking great rocker. Again, I wrote, what has Roger been doing for the last decade? It lyrically tells us to keep religion out of war, or stop using religion as a justification for war. Roger's voice, this is the beginning of what I like to call old Roger, where he doesn't really sound the same as he did on those old Floyd albums after this point. And then I also wrote, I need to listen to Jeff Beck's solo stuff because he's awesome. So I don't know. I don't know if that'll be a completion project in the future. I'll probably listen to some Jeff Beck after I finish with this recording, or a little while after I finish this recording. Who knows? But yeah, Perfect Sense Part 1. It's very Floydian until the 3-minute mark. It becomes, musically, it becomes sort of like a generic 90s ballad with Roger Waters lyrics. So, it's a mixed bag. You know what I mean? Stuff with it being a bit 90s pop. That's what I'm talking about, with it aging not great. And it's lyrically, some stuff could use a little bit of an update, but, this is Roger Waters. He's basically gonna make the same album again in a little bit here. Or not in a little bit here, in about 20 years. So, Perfect Sense Part 2, it's very Final Cut like, but unlike the Final Cut, it's not boring. And then there's like a war report stylized like a sports match underneath all the music and stuff. It's a very creative choice. That's aged pretty damn well. Talking about how like we obsess over war and shit. That has, aged pretty damn well. Um, you know, The Bravery of Being Out of Range, song number 5. It's like a great stadium rock jam shitting on, warmongers. It's genuinely great. And Jeff Beck's not on all of this album. Again, like this album could use with a little bit less of Roger going on and on and on. Like, because sometimes it feels like that. It could use with do with a little bit more music. Late Home Tonight, Part 1. It's an acoustic ballad shitting on society, making a spectacle out of war. That's all I had to say there. Song number 7, Late Home Tonight, Part 2. Musically orchestral, lyrically it's more of the same as Part 1. Lyrically a lot of these songs do kind of bleed together. That I do have that criticism. Again, like Roger, like on Dark Side of the Moon, Roger focused on, one aspect of society per song. Essentially, this one, like he's kind of stretching like 2 or 3 out to an hour and 15 minutes, which doesn't really work if you don't have music to keep your audience entertained. Not saying this doesn't, but it falls short in a couple of moments. Again. But song number 8, Too Much Rope. We learned nothing from Vietnam. This song could have benefited from a guitar solo. That's all I wrote there. You can tell how interested I was in a song by how much I wrote down in my notes. Song number 9, What God Wants Part 2, is more of Part 1. That's not at all a bad thing. The only thing I would say is that this needs a little bit more Jeff Beck. And then What God Wants Part 3, it's like musically it's like if Echoes and Breathe fused. Lyrically it's more of the same, but it does have a jizz-worthy guitar solo from Jeff Beck. I'm like, this is on par with David Gilmour. Like, it's awesome. It's fucking great. Watching song number 11, Watching TV. It's acoustic. It tells the story of a woman who was killed in Tiananmen Square. Okay, cool. Number 12, Three Wishes. Part of it's another stadium rock jam. A lot of it's just, it sounds like the rest of the album. Basically, careful what you wish for lyrically. But it does have another fucking great guitar solo. Like, Jeff Beck, I'm gonna need to listen to some Jeff Beck now. Song 13, It's a Miracle. It's a criticism of, early 90s consumerist culture. It doesn't have the musical depth to justify the 8.5 minute length, but it does contain another awesome solo at the end, and then it has a nice dig at Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's just like, it's something like Andrew Lloyd Webber's crap runs on Broadway for years and years, and then something like, part of the theater blows up and the piano, and lyrically it goes something like this, and the piano cover slams on the pianist's hand. It's a fucking miracle. That's... So Roger's not a fan of Andrew Lloyd Webber. Neither am I. I can't blame him. Again, doesn't really have the musical depth to cover, to justify the 8.5 minute length. But this album feels like, hey, CDs are a thing now. Let's fill all 74 minutes. Doesn't need it. And then Amused to Death. This is the longest song on the album, and it's an appropriate closer. Again, not as musically dense as I would like it to be, but again, like, it is an appropriate closer. It does sound like a lot of the rest of the album. It could have used with another Jeff Beck guitar solo. That's all I'm saying. Personnel-wise, obviously, you've got Roger Waters. I've mentioned Jeff Beck. Michael Kamen came back to do some orchestrations. But there's just a whole lot of people that I was not writing down. I'm sorry. It's a little bit less thorough, but it's like, obviously there were some people who came back, like Andy Fairweather Lowe and Rick DeFonso, but no Snowy White. Weirdly enough, no Eric Clapton, obviously. But yeah, give it a listen. Give it a listen. At the end, like in the middle of the album, I thought I was gonna come out of it with like a go buy it type thing, but I'm gonna reel it back a little bit to give it a listen. Give it a listen. I certainly want to own it now. But give it a listen. Do definitely give it a listen. I think it's the best thing Roger did in the studio without the Floyd. So, yeah. It's alright. Yeah, tomorrow, well, hold on, actually. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. If you have something to add, please do so in the comment section below. If you want to continue along this musical journey with me, please feel free to subscribe. If you want to hear me talk about something other than music, I have a podcast called Dorkies with two of my buddies. I will link the most recent episode of that in the description below. And if you want to hear what I happen to be listening to that day, or a 15-second segment at least, you can follow me on Instagram at Sean_Heaster1979, and where I post a 15-second segment of a song on my story there every single day. And sometimes I theme weeks to specific artists or specific, time periods. It's, we do some fun shit over there. But yeah, tomorrow we are looking at The Division Bell, Pink Floyd's final masterpiece. I enjoyed that album quite a bit. And next week, we will be looking at, I believe, a bunch of live albums. And a very, very special solo album. And something else very special. But yeah, I would like to thank you all very much for watching. And I will see you all in the next one, which will be The Division Bell. Bye-bye.